understand, first of all, that I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an engineer. And so my part of it was designing the microchip, not interfacing it to the nervous system and this type of thing. But byproducts that came from that were other microchips that began being used in places like Chino Prison. Instead of an lesion in the brain, they were using a microchip for sex offenders and child molesters. Now, folks, this was a progression of things that happened. And as it moved along, the chips became more sophisticated, and at one point they determined that we can't use a flat chip that has to be surgically implanted. This won't work. We got into designing cylindrical architecture, got into designing stacked strata, and building a cylindrical chip. This microchip, in fact, my wife has got one in her purse. It's going to be difficult to pass it around to everybody in here. In some meetings we can do that. Here it would be a little difficult. But this microchip, very small, fits through, and I have a hypodermic needle. Now, right here in Spokane, or in Sacramento, you have been exposed to this in pets and this type of thing. We've been using it for brands. We've been using it for all kinds of things. There's a group called InfoPet down in Los Angeles that claims they can keep track of 1 billion pets to within 10 feet of where they're at. And so these things are here. The reason we're here and sharing with you tonight is that these things are real, folks. And we're moving to the positive identification of the microchip. Now, I'm going to kind of bunch some things together here, but one of the things that happened was we went out, we spent $1.5 million doing some research on places to put the microchip. We had determined this chip has 250,000 components, a little lithium battery built into it, and a charging circuit. It fits through a hypodermic needle, and one of the problems was you got to recharge this thing. You can't run in and change your battery like you do on your watch once a year. And so they've got to recharge this thing. And so we had a charging circuit built into it. And it was a charging circuit built on temperature change. We spent $1.5 million, between 1.2 and $1.5 million, trying to determine where the places on the body were that the temperature changed the most rapidly. They could have asked any mother. All they'd had to do was ask her, because the places they came up with, and I've got the reports back on it, the places they came up with were just below the hairline, on the forehead and on the back of the right hand. 2 places in the body. I think it was kind of interesting because there wasn't an Antichrist in that group. There was 100 men involved in it, or actually 101 men and a couple of women involved in the project. There wasn't an Antichrist. There wasn't anybody that came in wearing long red underwear and a tail and a pair of horns. Everybody was, they were just guys trying to do a job. We had a lot of freedom in what we were doing, and we were all trying to do the very best we can. One of the things during the project engineer doesn't always get to control everything, and I fought the use of lithium as a battery source. I didn't like the idea of lithium because I felt that lithium was a little risky in some areas, and I felt that it might cause us some problems. I wanted to go to a couple other ones, gallium arsenide. I wanted to go to a couple other battery sources, and they wouldn't go to that with me. Then I began to understand, after God put the call on my life, and I began to look at Scripture, why? And I would like to have you turn with me to Revelation 13, and I'm going to show you some things. The Bible that I had at the time, I read it, and it said in verse 16, it said, "And he caused us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead." Now, the Bible I had said on the right hand or on the forehead. I looked at that and I said, praise God, I didn't do it. I wasn't a part of it. Oh, isn't that good? And the Lord said, look at the word mark. And I said, but Lord, he said, look it up in the Greek. And I've got the pages from the Strong's Concordance here so that you can look it up yourself. The word mark is charagma in the Greek. And it's 5480 in the Strong's Concordance in the Greek. And it says a scratch, an etching, a stamp, as a badge of servitude, or cut into. It takes you to the word charax, which is to sharpen to a point. The idea of scratching, a stake, a pointed object, pointed into. I believe what John saw as Jesus was giving him the book of Revelation, I believe what he saw was a hypodermic needle, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in the meetings that I have been in, meetings in Luxembourg, meetings in London, meetings at the Sir Francis Drake Hotel in San Francisco with a lot of these people, I've been in 17 of these One World type meetings, the whole idea behind it is identification. And folks, it's not a barcode. You can't contain enough in a barcode. First thing is, nobody would accept a barcode. Who wants that thing out there? But I believe it's the microchip under the skin. And by the way, I'll go into at the last meeting we had this morning, a church that we were in, a man walked up who was a government employee right here in Sacramento and said, I attended a meeting last week where they said key personnel will receive the microchip, government personnel, key personnel, and he was in that meeting. And so we're finding these things. Well, God showed me something else. He said, take a look at not the numbers 666, but the word for 666. I said, Lord, I didn't know there was one of those. And there is. It is 5516 in the Strong's Concordance, and it's Chixastigma. The 22nd and 14th, an optional letter of the Greek alphabet, intermediate between the 5th and 6th, used as numbers denoting respectively 660 and 6. That takes you to the word stigma. The last part of that word is stigma. Now I want you to listen to this carefully because it's really, it was difficult to dig this out. It's difficult to share it with you. The word stigma is to stick or to prick, a mark incised or punched for recognition of ownership. And so I looked at all of those and I wept for days. And God said, you let me take care of it. You go and share the message. I've set you, O Son of Man, as a watchman on the wall to sound the trumpet. And if you don't sound the trumpet, their blood is on your hands. But if you sound the trumpet and they don't listen, the blood is on their hands. And folks, I'm here to share these things with you for a reason. There's too many things that have tied together in these days. We have children in Florida right now in daycare centers receiving the microchip identification. It is being used in many, many areas. There's Alzheimer's patients receiving it. The whole thing about the pictures on the milk cartons and the paper bags was government funded, and that thing was to condition you about lost children. And it has served its purpose, and you're seeing it disappear now. You check back and find out who paid for it. There wasn't a committee paying for it. It was paid for through an organization called Evergreen, which is a CIA operation. And they paid for it. Now, I want to point something else out to you. I fought the lithium, and they overruled me, and they used lithium. Talked to one of the doctors at my Boston Medical Center about the concentration of lithium used in the microchip. I said, what happens if that breaks down? If the chip breaks down, if there's a blow struck and it breaks down? He said, and this guy was an atheist, he said it'll cause a sore, a grievous sore. And I went and I looked at Revelation 16, verse 2. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worship the image. I want to point out something to you, folks. That sore is singular. It's sore. They didn't break out with sores. They broke out with a sore. I believe God's going to pop them microchips all at once for all the people that have cut them, and they're all going to end up with a boil on their hand. Praise God. You know, it's an interesting thing about God is omnipresent, omnipotent. He is everywhere. But what's the Antichrist got to do? He's got to use every bit of technology he can to keep track of you and I. And so he's going to use everything he can, and that's the reason why I believe we've come to this. It's not an easy message. It's a hard message to go out and give, but I want to tell you something, folks. God is on the throne, and we win. And if you'll check the tomb, it is empty. And we need to be excited about that. We're living in the most exciting time we could ever live in. The reason why you're pulled together as a body of Christ is to be with one another, to support one another, to lift one another up. I had people ask me this morning, well, what should we do? When's this going to happen? I tell them, the when doesn't make any difference. If you don't know the who, you're in trouble already. I want to tell you something. I'm not selling bomb killers, folks. I'm not selling place in your backyard to store food. I'm not selling a special glove to wear. I'm not selling anything. I'm sharing with you a message. The technology is here. Now I want to move on a little bit more in this technology. We now have 23 satellites overhead that can read a postage stamp laying on a tennis court. If you think you're keeping a secret the fact that you're coming to church here, the satellite can read your license plates every 19 minutes without any problem at all. The technology is there. People talk about here a while back there was flashes across the sky and they were wondering what it was. These were satellites being taken out of the system. Satellites that their perigee and the apogee will interfere with a new series of satellites that's going up. It was just announced about 3 weeks ago. We knew it was coming for a long time. They are LEO satellites, low Earth orbiting satellites. These satellites are orbiting 98 to 100 miles up. There is 66 of them being put up by Motorola in conjunction with the Russians. These satellites will do away with all cellular towers, and there will not be a place where you can go to hide. We can pick up your body temperature change right now, the difference between 98.6 and 104, and so we can pick that up. So what I'm telling you is that there's no place that you're going to run and hide. Now don't get in despair on me, because I want to tell you something. Again, we win. Jesus was standing there. They picked up stones to stone him, and he walked back through their midst, and they saw him not. Where are you going to hide? You want to fear what Big Brother's going to do? You want to fear what the government's going to do? I'm going to tell you, folks, we're moving rapidly to a cashless society. We're moving to the point where your debit card is going to be it. It is now your credit card and debit card together, and we're moving rapidly towards that. In Clinton and Gore's new book, Putting People First, he says, and Hillary said today, they want every man, woman, and child in the United States to be carrying a smart card. The smart card is a French card. 1 million of them have already been brought into Maryland in the welfare system. Folks, it has the microchip in it. It is the same readout as the microchip for the back of the hand. And the system is being prepared for that microchip. Now, these cards are coming in. That's the smart card. The ATM machines are being changed so that they will scan this type of thing. These things are moving rapidly. So the system is being set up. The message that I have to give you is don't take it. Don't take it. Somebody comes and tries to talk you into this new identification, you've got an answer for them. Don't take it. It says, who are these around the throne? The myriads and myriads around the throne? These are those that lost their life because they would not take the charagma, the mark. So there's going to be people that are going to lose their lives because they won't take the mark. We are moving rapidly in that direction. The Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare stated that welfare fraud is running $500 million a quarter. He was on a talk show. He said that is going to cease by the end of '93. We are going to have positive identification. The talk show host asked him what it was. He said electronic media under the skin. The Immigration and Control Act of 1986, Section 100, states the President has the authority to order whatever type of identification he deems necessary, whether it be electronic media under the skin or whether it be an invisible tattoo. The invisible tattoo was thrown out because it can't be upgraded. The microchip has an E-squared prom section of it. It can be, a part of it can be erased and you can write more into it. So you can change the data. The chip fits exactly what the Bible says is happening. People say to me, well, what happens if I cross my fingers when they come and bring me the chip, and I take it and I cross my fingers and or I cross my toes or I cross my legs or I do something, and I don't really mean it when they give it to me? I don't have an answer for you except this. Revelation 14, verse 9, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Folks, that's the only answer I have for you. I'm saying don't take it. This is not something you can play with and back out of. I have sat there with Gates from the CIA, with Bush when he was with the CIA, with Henry Kissinger and these people in meetings in Luxembourg where they discussed the very thing. You cannot control a people if you cannot identify them. And that's why we have $500 million in welfare fraud every quarter, is because you can't identify people. You can fake cards. You can counterfeit cards. You can lose cards. You can loan your card to somebody else. But the microchip in the hand, you cannot lose your hand. You might lose your keys, but you can't lose your hand. You can't bend, staple, or mutilate the thing. You can't counterfeit it. And if somebody steals your hand and goes to the market to use it to buy food, the guy's going to know right away something is wrong. Okay? Can you imagine carrying your friend's head into the supermarket and saying, I want to buy these groceries? Folks, it is the ultimate identification, and it is here. It is being used. 17,000 babies were done 3 years ago. There is no ill effects. We've got these projects coming. I just talked to a man from Sweden today, and he said they did 6,000 men in Sweden with the microchip and have had no problems at all. It is coming worldwide. You see, this scripture talks about the world. It doesn't talk about just the United States. There is a one-world government coming. By the way, there is a one-world government under Jesus Christ that's coming. The Antichrist has got to use everything he can do to fake his one-world government. Okay? Oh, I promised to tell you about those streaks across the sky you saw a few months ago. People were talking about them. They were in the paper, and they didn't understand what they were. At Stanford, we worked with a convergence laser. We did a lot of things with that convergence laser. It was part of a Star Wars type program. That convergence laser we took down to Edwards Air Force Base. We used it down there. But that convergence laser is what's been knocking those renegade satellites out of the sky. Okay? And that's what you're seeing is the flash of those things being knocked out. The perigee and the epigee of those satellites will interfere with the LEO satellites when they put them up. There are many things that I'd like to share with you. There are things about the one world government and what's going on in the one world government, clear from the Illuminati right on down to the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System, folks, is neither federal nor is it a reserve. It has no reserves. It is controlled and held by 5 banks. It is controlled by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. The men's pay that work in the Federal Reserve comes out of Europe. It doesn't even come out of the United States. It is owned by the banking system. It causes the ebbs and flows and the fluctuations in our money, but it does not belong to our government. Okay? The Federal Reserve has never been audited. Men who have tried to ask for an audit of the Federal Reserve have suddenly disappeared. There's things that happen to them. Harry Reasoner, a man who I spoke with in Seattle, made a statement on his program about it was time we had an audit of the Federal Reserve. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Flight 007, a congressman that was on that, had been pounding for an audit of the Federal Reserve System, and he was gone. It's pretty easy to mistake a Boeing 747 for a fighter aircraft, isn't it? That's what they shot down. They thought they shot down an intruding fighter, and it was a 747. Korean Airlines Flight 007. Folks, I want to tell you something. There is a conspiracy. You can believe it. You can bank on it. There is a conspiracy in this country to bring us to a one-world government. Let me tell you a little bit about one of the aspects of that conspiracy, and then I'm going to close. I'm not able to share everything tonight. We have tapes and literature out there, and we have the one-world government tape, and so you're welcome to take that. That's right. I'm about out of time, right? On a tape, and you'll be able to hear them. I want to talk about a group called the Trilateral Commission because I think it affects each and every one of you. 1973, David Rockefeller, who headed the Trilateral, who formed the Trilateral Commission, called upon 5 of his Arab buddies, who were all Masons, and let's boycott the oil to the United States. At the same time, they capped the wells in Louisiana. They capped wells in California here. They shut them down. They shut down any North Shore crude that was coming out. And all of you found yourself at gas lines, 5 gallons at a time every other day. And it was predicted what you were going to do. They knew what you were going to do. You turned around then and started buying toys. You bought Toyotas, Datsuns, all kinds of Japanese cars. Japan turned into an industrial giant overnight, had so much money that much of that money ended up in Europe, coming back into the United States, purchasing companies like Signetics, like a large percentage of General Electric and other companies. Many of my patents were moved to France and to other countries because of this. Technology moved out of the country. You can go over into Silicon Valley and you can find weeds growing up through parking lots in some of the buildings that are over there. The technology moved because they had the money to buy it. The largest landowners in the state of California and in Washington and Oregon are foreign landowners owning great conglomerates of land. Many things have gone on in the banking system to create these kind of things. Banking regulations have changed. Farmers who had good loans all of a sudden lost their farms because the banking regulations had changed. And these things ended up into corporate farms and conglomerates and foreign owned. You can't hardly go to a golf course in California here, but what it isn't owned, foreign owned. Am I against foreign ownership? No, I'm just telling you. Folks, I'm a thermometer, not a rheostat. You can't turn me up or down. I'm just telling you what is. And what happened out of that thing with the Trilateral Commission was that they turned Japan into an industrial giant. We are a debtor nation to Japan today. We owe Japan more money than we can pay. And it happened because of that. The trade deficits go on and on and on. There haven't been no trade restrictions put against Japan, and you'll see every time it comes up, it fizzles. And the reason it does is because the government's not in control of what's going on there. I'm going to tell you something else, and this may come as a shock to you. This last election we had, Clinton and Gore were at a Bilderberger meeting in Biden, and 5 months before the election. I've got documentation and pictures of them coming out of the building. David Rockefeller was with them, and he said he thanked the news media for keeping the secret of the Bilderbergers. The election was over, folks, at that point. The election was over. Bush did not put up a fight. He was very passive in all of the debates. He did not put up a fight. There was a concern that even at that, there was momentum building. So H. Ross Perot, who is a CFR member, was brought back in at the last moment to pull Bush votes. Now, these are conspiracies, folks, that are documented, and they happened. You look at the popular vote and how close it was. And if Perot hadn't come back in, it would have been a different story. A lot of people thought that Bush was going to win, but Clinton and Gore had been set up. The commander-in-chief had been removed and a new commander-in-chief put in. It's time we stop fooling around. There is no place that you can hide. The surveillance satellites will find you wherever you go. We are truly moving to a cashless society where you will not be able to buy or sell without the mark.
You're listening to the sounds of PCRL, the People's Community Radio, Birmingham. Yo, peace. You're listening to the sounds of PCRL, the People's Community Radio, Birmingham.
You know you got to fight, stand up for your rights.
Forget wearable technology. Swedish office worker Lynn Kowalaska is having it implanted under her skin. A microchip about the size of a grain of rice is injected into her hand.
It felt pretty scary, but at the same time it felt very modern, very 2015.
Instead of ID cards or passcodes, workers who sign up for the implant can now open doors with the wave of a hand. The chip also currently lets workers swap contact details via a smartphone and operate a photocopier. Patrick Mesterton, co-founder of the Epicenter Tech Hub in central Stockholm, sees plenty of future applications for the implant.
Like anything where you today would use a PIN code or a key or a card. So payments is, I think, one area. I think also for healthcare reasons, that you can sort of communicate with your doctor and you can get data on what you eat and sort of what your physical status is.
The radio frequency identification chip is made from Pyrex glass and contains an antenna and microchip with no need for batteries. While some workers may feel uneasy at the prospect of literally taking their work home with them, the designers say the chip is completely safe and secure.
You have your own identification code and you're sending that to something else which you have to grant access to. So there's no one else that can sort of follow you on your ID, so to say. It's you who decide who gets access to that ID.
The chip is in no way mandatory, and the limited benefits the implant currently offers may put many people off. But with wearable tech becoming more ubiquitous, the merging of biology and technology could represent a growing trend.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the fourth Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth Industrial Revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. So this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to design products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, it isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, program something, and it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra step to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion and FIRST Robotics, trying to encourage students from third grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened, I'm going to go change this or that. And that was third graders.
I just given a prize to a kid of 18 years old that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it and say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I mean, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that.
Fourth industrial revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patient. First, we take a three-dimensional X-ray and we extract the three-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this three-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery, getting molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotion, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
People always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
Even though we have everyday problems we have to solve, we have to find a way to lay the foundations for the innovations of tomorrow.
How do we understand our place in the universe? How do we try to answer the big questions in life? Who are we? What are we made of? Where do we come from? With the advent of digital age of computing, we were suddenly able to answer questions never before solved. Exploring the relationship between the imagination of the scientists and the frontier of computing and the ever closer reality of the universal quantum computer, this film examines the hazy boundary between imagination and reality.
So what I want to build is a large-scale quantum computer, a device which can solve certain problems so much faster, tremendously much faster. So what means much faster here? Much faster means that even the fastest classical computer may take 1 million years for a problem a quantum computer can solve in a few milliseconds. So that means we can solve problems which we never even thought of that would be solvable. You know, we may find new drugs, we may understand processes in biology, we may understand life itself. I grew up in Germany in a place called Ulm, close to Munich and Stuttgart. My mom would always say I'm asking a hole in her stomach because I kept on asking questions about everything. My father would take me to the planetarium and we would watch the shows, and I would go out in the evening with my telescope and try to learn about the planets and about nebulas and space in general. I watched Star Trek in primary school and then I wanted to be a science officer on the Enterprise. And then I did some research and tried to figure out what do I need to study to become science officer on the Enterprise. I realized that actually being on a spaceship is not so great, but understanding nature is actually pretty awesome. So and understanding how things work, the mysteries of quantum physics, in fact the mysteries of subatomic particles, of how the world works. What I really wanted to do is building something which can teleport somebody from A to B, building some kind of shield for a starship, building a starship engine or things like that. All these kind of things fascinated me. And so this is maybe the starting time of my scientific career, really. One of the things which is very strange is that you could be at two different places at the same time. So that doesn't mean there's two of you, it means you are at two different places at the same time. And so we actually make use of that, not with people, but with individual atoms. And so we have them at two places at the same time. There's another very strange thing, which is entanglement. And basically what that means is if you have two entangled particles, and you separate these two particles and put them on one end each of the universe. If you do something to one of these particles, then something will happen to the other particle, even though they don't communicate. And that's just very strange. It really is completely mind-boggling. And we actually trying to utilize such quantum effects to build a quantum computer. For a normal traditional computer, you write certain things into the memory, and then, for example, a number, and that number then goes through the processor, is computed, maybe multiplied with another number, and the output happens. Now imagine you could write all the numbers in the world simultaneously into your memory and compute simultaneously all the calculations you want to do and get all the results out at the same time. This is kind of how a quantum computer works. So what do you see here? This actually is a very rudimentary, extremely small quantum computer. So your classical computer operates basically with a memory, a hard drive, and on that hard drive you save information, and that information is saved in bits. And so the more information you want to save, the more bits you require. And so the same in a quantum computer, you want more and more bits. The more complicated the problems you want to solve, the more bits you need. But now you're not using bits, you use quantum bits. And quantum bits are encoded in each ion. So one ion is one quantum bit. And so inside a quantum computer you have then tens, hundreds, thousands, even millions of individual atoms. And each atom is exactly